Okay, so after centuries, some would say over 500 years since the transatlantic slave trade. I mean, this is really a heavy word to call it trade to slavery happened, and the global community has now formally recognized slavery as the biggest crime, the gravest crime against humanity through a United Nations resolution that was adopted on this week on Wednesday. So for this, we have invited Ambassador David Comissiong to share his view with us because he was leading vocal on reparations and others related to this. But first thing is first, welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you, Marlet. It's a pleasure to be here with you once again.
It's an honor for us. So just to say a few words about Ambassador David Comissiong, he is an ambassador to Barbados, an ambassador to CARICOM from Barbados, and he's also a Pan-Africanist. He's a leading Pan-Africanist and the founder of Clement Pain Movement, a social and political activist group in Barbados. Also in reparation, a vocal advocate for reparatory justice. He frequently represents Barbados in global discussions and also representing CARICOM regarding compensation for the historical injuries of slavery and colonialism. So he is the right person for us, and he's also, we can proudly say, a family here at Connect Africa. Now let's dive into the questions. Ambassador, for those who may be hearing about your work for the first time, could you briefly share your journey and what led you to become such a prominent advocate for reparations and also Barbados? Before we start to talk about what happened on Wednesday or even what next, because some of us don't know the journey that has been or the work that has been put into this. Finally to hear what we have heard on Wednesday night.
Well, thanks, Marlet. I have been involved in Pan-Africanism for virtually my entire adult life. I am an attorney at law by vocation, and I really first became deeply involved in Pan-Africanism back in 1987. I don't think you were born yet. We were celebrating the centenary of Marcus Garvey, and at that time I was a young senator in the government of Barbados, and I spent that year commemorating Marcus Garvey, his life and his work. And then I just got deeply immersed. And by the early 1990s, I made contact with Mr. Bernie Grant, British Member of Parliament, who had commenced upon a reparations journey. And we connected. He shared information with me. And I would say that that was my real introduction to reparations back in the early 1990s. And then later in the decade, I became the director of the Barbados government's Commission for Pan-African Affairs. And as director, that led me to the United Nations World Conference Against Racism in South Africa in 2001. And much of what we are seeing now in the area of reparations has its foundation in that World Conference Against Racism. So I've been involved. In 2018, I became a Barbados Ambassador. I became Barbados's ambassador to the Caribbean Community, which is an organization of 15 states in the Caribbean. And in that organization, Barbados has lead responsibility for reparations. So that has meant that, I've been even more involved since 2018. And I'm also the deputy chair of the Barbados National Task Force on Reparations. I've been a member of that task force since 2012. So suffice to say, I have seen and been involved with almost the entire reparations journey from the 1990s. And in fact, the president of Ghana, President Mahama, who piloted that resolution at the United Nations General Assembly yesterday, we met and discussed reparations back in October of 2023. We were both keynote speakers at Dalhousie University's a special conference they held in October 2023. The universities on slavery, educating about slavery. His was the opening keynote address of the conference, and mine was the closing keynote address. And we met at the hotel. He wanted to learn more about reparations, and we met in his hotel room. We discussed reparations and why it was so important, an issue not only for the African descended people of the diaspora, but also for the people of continental Africa. So I do have, a little relationship with him centered around the reparations issue. So it was very pleasing to me to see the leadership that he has taken on this reparations issue.
Yeah, no, thank you really for pointing that out. I remember myself, you have been here quite a few times, and I have asked, when does Africa come really in the front run in advancing this campaign? Because it's always the Caribbean community as if the victims are only on the other side. And it didn't surprise me that it was Ghana, but I didn't know on what condition, how Ghana really takes that and started to run it in front with this agenda. And it was really, as an African, being from the continent, it makes me proud seeing Africa stepping up and working with CARICOM. It was as if, to the point, it was only on the shoulder of Barbados, because it was always what we see is Prime Minister Mia Mottley talking about it on the United Nations. We don't see anything. And yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out.
But remember last year in September, there was a very special heads of government conference in Addis Ababa.
Yes.
We brought together heads of government of the African Union and heads of government of CARICOM, the Caribbean community, on the 7th of September.
Yeah.
And at that summit, the issue of reparations was center stage. And in fact, out of that summit came the joint African Union CARICOM Declaration on Reparations, where the two organizations agreed to come together in a partnership on reparations. So what Ghana did with this resolution has to be seen within the context of that agreement that African Union and CARICOM will now partner in taking forward this reparations campaign. And I should tell you, to the credit of the African Union, immediately after that summit, they established a committee to oversee their reparations campaign, and they included in that committee a representative of the Caribbean, Dr. June Suma, who is from St. Lucia. And they also established a second committee. They established a committee of legal experts to deal with the legal side of reparations, and they included me on that committee. So it says a lot for the African Union that they have actually reached out beyond the continent, and they have included representatives from the Caribbean on the two committee that they have set up. And within the African Union, they have designated Ghana as the country, and the president of Ghana as the person who will be a kind of ambassador for reparations. So what happened yesterday should be seen within the context of this partnership that we are building. And it is noteworthy that every single CARICOM country voted for that resolution. So CARICOM was fully on board. And beyond that, experts in reparations from the Caribbean actually worked with the Ghanaians craft that resolution and to help pilot it through the United Nations General Assembly.
Okay, very good then. Now, moving on, talking about what happened on Wednesday, the UN resolution, the adoption of this resolution, let's talk about the expectation versus reality. So, as you mentioned in one of your lectures, which I really, really recommended to everyone that I know, I'm going to share it also here in the chat section, where you talk about slavery and reparation. You raise 10 points, and in that lecture, that slavery has long been understood legally and morally as a crime against humanity. Now, with the United Nations formally adopting this resolution, recognizing slavery as a gravest crime against humanity, now my question is that, is this the outcome what CARICOM was hoping for, and also the African Union? Now that you updated us with this information, with that joint committee that has been set up in September, is this the result that you have been hoping for? Would you describe it as satisfactory, or is it only a first step towards something bigger?
It is just a step towards something bigger. The struggle is still ahead of us. We still have to fight the battle. Now, the reality is, way back in 2001, at that Durban World Conference Against Racism, we did pass resolutions speaking about slavery being a crime against humanity, and that there's a case for reparations. However, that World Conference was about all aspects of racism, and it related to everybody on the face of the earth. What made yesterday's General Assembly resolution special is that it was only about this particular issue, the trafficking in enslaved Africans and the system of racialized slavery that was imposed on Africans. And so here was the entire United Nations General Assembly focusing just on this one issue and declaring it not simply a crime against humanity, but the worst crime against humanity of them all in human history. And also, of course, going on to indicate some of the things that should now flow out of this resolution. And what made this resolution very special as well is the amount of detail that went into establishing why this is a crime. Anybody who reads that resolution, I think it's about a 9, I have it somewhere here. It's about a 9-page resolution, but yes, here it is. Here it is. Here's the text.
Wow.
It is, yes, a 7-page resolution, sorry, but it goes into tremendous detail, historical and legal detail, establishing why this is a crime. So this is this is extremely good work. and gives us something of real substance to work with. But it is not the end of the battle, because when you look at the vote, 123 countries voted for the resolution. All of Africa, all of the Caribbean, many Latin American countries, some Asian countries, China, Russia, etc. However, there were 52 countries that abstained, and there were 3 countries that voted against. Well, the ones that voted against, the usual suspects: United States,
I was gonna come to that.
Israel,
Yeah.
Argentina, very racist, historically a very racist country. But the entire European Union abstained. All of these European countries that were involved in enslavement and beyond, because it was not only the Western European countries that abstained, but even the Eastern Europe and Central European countries. So, and the problem is, so yes, we now have a UN declaration declaring that what happened, what transpired over those centuries, was a crime against humanity. The United Nations also has a court. It's called the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. The problem is, however, that virtually all of these European countries, the ones that have colonial histories, when they signed up to the jurisdiction of the ICJ, they included reservations in their signing up. They included reservations. For example, in the case of Britain, Britain included a reservation that said that the ICJ can only have jurisdiction over cases that are after the year 1974. So that anything that happened in that colonial period and that period of enslavement, that they do not consent to giving the ICJ any jurisdiction. So it's not a simple case now where we can simply, okay, well, we know that slavery was a crime, and we know that once there's a crime, there has to be a remedy, and reparations is the remedy for a grievous crime, such as a crime against humanity. We can now go to court. It's not as simple as that. So we are still going to have to fight this battle. We have to bring these governments to the negotiating table. We have to bring them to a concession that you were involved in criminality, you do owe compensation to the African people, and you come and sit at a negotiating table. Let us discuss it, and let us work out what this reparations package will look like. Now, this has happened with a number of European families, a number of European institutions, some universities, some companies, some banks. They have said, when confronted with the evidence, yes, we concede our family, our institution was involved in criminality. We did damage, and we apologize, and we want to make some kind of restitution or repair. So we have seen that with some families and institutions, but we have not seen that with a single European government. So that is the real battle that we have to fight now, because while we welcome reparations gestures by families and universities, the truth is that the real target of our reparations campaign is the governments, because the governments are the institutional structure that link the present with the past. It is the governments that organize that whole and legitimize that whole system. benefited from it financially, use those resources to develop their country. And it is the governments that have access to the substantial resources that are required to do justice to our reparations claim. So we still have to fight this battle with the governments, but having this resolution is going to help us. This is going to give us some ammunition that we are going to be able to deploy in our campaign to bring these European governments to the reparations table.
So if it was according to what they have signed the reservations in the ICJ or whatnot in all these international courts, ICC or ICJ, they will be immune from the reparation or anything that is going to be against them, right? It will give them immunity. That's what it means.
It means, no, it just means that in that particular court, they have not agreed. And you see, all of these courts, they're set up by treaty. So countries have to sign on to the treaty. So they've all signed on to the ICJ treaty. But the treaty gives countries the right to determine how much of the jurisdiction of the court they will accept. So they said, okay, we agree to be a member of the ICJ, to be under the jurisdiction of the ICJ, but we are putting conditions on our participation in the ICJ. So, you know, that is part of the system of international law. You sign up to a treaty, you could include some reservation, right, into how far you subject yourself to that treaty. So it just means that is an institution. I mean, we could still use the ICJ, for example. We could go to the ICJ for an advisory opinion on reparations and slavery. So we could still take a case. The ICJ judges can say, yes, we rule that the African governments and Caribbean governments and people have a good claim against you, Britain, you, France, you, Spain and Portugal. You were involved in a crime. You owe them. ICJ can say that, but it's just advisory. It doesn't bind them legally. So, but there, so right now, we cannot say that there is a court, an international court that exists that we can have access to at this point in time. But the point is, that there are many ways. I think we appreciate that we have to apply several strategies in this reparations effort. What we did yesterday was a diplomatic strategy. So here we use the international institutions, the United Nations General Assembly. We got a resolution passed that has certain power behind it. That made headline news all around the world. That brought together 123 countries that said, we stand together and we stand behind Africa and the Caribbean. We stand behind African people in this cause. So that is one strategy. That's a diplomatic strategy. And diplomacy is important because no country wants to feel that it is isolated. No country wants to feel that world public opinion has galvanized against them. No country wants to feel that they're being condemned in international diplomatic circles. So that's one strategy. Of course, another strategy, there are legal strategies. You could go for an advisory opinion. In the case of the Caribbean, the government of Jamaica is actually taking a case to the British Privy Council, because Jamaica has the British monarchy is still the head of state of Jamaica. So Jamaica has decided they're going to take a case to the British Privy Council, which is in the, like the highest court in Britain. So this, because they still recognize the British monarchy and they still recognize the British Privy Council as their highest court. So they're going to try that. So that will be part of a legal strategy. And if the British Privy Council rules that yes, slavery was, when Britain practiced slavery in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, they were committing a crime, that may not be enough in itself to deliver reparations, but it will be a big victory. Of course, the British will probably say, well, yes, okay, the Privy Council has ruled that it was a crime, but we are still not coming to the table because we don't accept that the people alive today, were the victims and so much time has passed and all that nonsense. So we know that they're going to put up a fight. They've been putting up a fight for decades now. When we raised this issue in Durban, South Africa in 2001, they were saying, yes, we agree that these terrible things were done back in those centuries, but we don't owe reparations because when we practiced slavery against African people back then, it was legal. We were not committing a crime. Well, the UN has now said you were committing a crime, but we know that they're still going to try to deny us. They're still going to come up with all kinds of justifications and excuses. So we have a battle on our hands. But I believe that we have to fight this battle on every possible front. We have to do public education. We have to tell our story to the world. We have to tell our story to the people, the good people of these European countries. We have to seek out allies, whether it is the church, whether it is students, the student movement, whether it is trade unions, people of good conscience, whether it's the families who have been willing to say, yes, we concede, we were involved in a crime. So it has to be a multifaceted campaign. I don't think there's any one strategy that is going to win it for us. I think it's going to be a combination of several things coming together. And I don't think that CARICOM, we could win it by ourselves. AU, you could win it by yourself. It is going to have to be that partnership where we come together with a lot of, power, a lot of clout. Yeah.
Speaking of partnership, one of the things I was so rejoiced to see was that for the first time, if we see, every time when agendas are taken, when Africans vote in matters, that are not even our own, how the voting looks like. And this is, I think, in my time, the first time that I have seen the whole continent, and also together with CARICOM, voted as one and with other allies from other continents as well. Now, that aside, this is one of the most revealing aspects from this resolution adoption. Now, the question is, what did the moment tell us about who is or who are about our true allies in the global reparations movement? You have touched it, you have touched upon it a little. And were you surprised by the countries voted against or who, those who hide themselves in the name of abstain?
Well, just before answering that question, just let me inform your viewers that just last week I was in Colombia. We have, in addition to CARICOM, which is a Caribbean organization, we have a broader organization called the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. So that is CARICOM plus the countries of South and Central America. And just last week, we were all in Colombia in South America for we call that organization CILAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CILAC. So we were there for a CILAC Africa high-level forum. So there were 16 African countries. The African Union Commission was also there. And one of the main topics for that week was reparations. In fact, there were over 5,000 people taking part in those discussions on reparations. So just to let you know, that it's not only CARICOM, we are also coming together. There's a coming together. There's a coming together of Africa with the Caribbean and now with Latin America. And one of the key issues is the issue of reparations. In fact, one of the driving forces behind that coming together of CILAC and Africa with reparations is the current vice president of Colombia, a black woman, African woman, Vice President Francia Marquez. And she has really been pushing that relationship, Latin America, Caribbean, Africa, around reparations. So these are very positive signs, just as you said, and it was reflected in the vote yesterday.
Yeah.
The only Latin American country that abstained was the only Latin American country that voted against was Argentina, and I think there were two Latin American countries that abstained. I think Paraguay abstained, and I think Bolivia abstained. But the majority, and certainly the biggest and most influential ones like Brazil and Mexico, they all voted for the resolution. The ones, as I said, I was not surprised by the ones that abstained because I've seen that behavior for 25 years now. That behavior was evident, as I said, at the World Conference in Durban, South Africa. Now, the United States is very problematical because the United States is home to a very important segment of the African diaspora, the African American people. But of course, we know what kind of government, what kind of people are running that country now. We know that this Trump administration and even before Trump, they were still behaving the same way. But I would think that the African American population, cannot simply take that lying down. Here is their government, technically their government, denying that anything is owed to them. So that is a direct challenge, I think, to the African American population. And I would hope that what happened yesterday will spur them into even more activism on this issue. Because, as I said, in all of these European countries, we need people fighting this battle from within. We are fighting it from without. But to the extent that we could have within these countries, we could have elements of their own population who are fighting this battle, who are saying to their government, listen, we are demanding that you do the right thing in relation to the people and nations of Africa and the Caribbean and the African diaspora. So I think that's another big part of our campaign. We have to have these allies within all of these countries. And of course, I mean, the African American population, they are part of the struggle. But I'm speaking even about white people and white organizations. We have to cultivate these allies within these countries so that we can exert as much pressure as possible from outside, but also from within.
Sorry, I was muted. One of our viewers, who happens to be from the United States, is updating us here. He by the username Child of God 9124. We have been fighting my entire life, and everyone has. Now that is gaining traction. They are trying to front run our reparations. Illinois cities are already giving out reparations. California state is already passing reparation legislation. Maryland is passing reparation legislation. Are you sure? So now Africans want to say, wow, they want our reparations? Is that?
No, there's this kind of very myopic and misconceived phenomenon in the United States. There's a segment of the African American population that wants to separate itself from the rest of the Black or African world. And that is very, very unfortunate. It is very counterproductive. And I think this viewer is probably one of that grouping. So this is something that has divided the Black community in the United States. This destructive separatism that I think they call themselves foundational Black Americans, and they make a distinction between themselves and the Black people who came from the Caribbean, Black people who came from the African continent, and this is very, very unfortunate at a time when all across the Black world we are coming together. The Black people of the Caribbean are coming together with our continental African brothers and sisters, the Black populations, the African descended populations of Brazil and Colombia and Venezuela. We are all coming together. We are all coming together. African communities in Europe, we are all coming together, and we recognize that one struggle we have in common is the struggle for reparations. You know, if we look at our experience in the Caribbean, slave colonies in the Caribbean could not have survived without the inputs coming from the United States of America, from North America. So a lot of the provisioning of the slave colonies that kept that slavery system going in the Caribbean came not from Europe. They came from what became Canada and United States of America. There were many slave traders out of what became the United States of America who went to the coast of Africa and brought enslaved people to the Caribbean. So the point is, anybody who really knows the history of slavery, you cannot separate it out and say, you know, it is only relevant to this part of the Black world and not. No, it was one interconnected all-embracing system. There was that triangular trade from Europe to the African continent. They loaded up with enslaved African labor across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, onwards to North America, to what became the United States of America, Canada, to the whole of Americas, and then back to Europe. So it was one international, all-embracing system of oppression and exploitation of African people. And out of that came anti-Black racism. Out of that came all of this negative stereotyping of all Black or African people. And we all suffered from that system of anti-Black prejudice, anti-Black stereotyping, this notion that once you were of Black ethnicity or pigmentation, wherever you were from, whether from the continent, the Caribbean, the United States, wherever, that you were lesser than, you were some lesser being. And we have all suffered from that and continue to suffer from it today. So reparations is a campaign that belongs to all of us. All of us, and we need to pursue it together. So this nonsense about African Americans, some of them, this is still a minority. This is still a minority opinion in that community, but that minority who pushes that divisiveness, that separatism, I think they're very misguided, and yes, I would openly say. The United States of America government owes reparations to the Black people of the Caribbean too. It is only a matter of time before we in CARICOM we have made a reparations claim against these 10 European countries that were directly involved in colonization and native genocide in the Caribbean. But beyond that, there can be no doubt that the United States also played a role in our enslavement and our oppression. And in my opinion, it is only a matter of time before we advance a claim to the US government as well. But yes, it is not really possible to separate out this reparation struggle. This involves all of us, all African people. It involves us all.
Now let's turn to UK, its political narratives, and I think I should say historical awareness, because I was surprised, or also not surprised. I read this tweet message on X platform from our own Kemi Badenoch, Nigerian-born British, a leader of Conservative Party in UK. So where her tweet, I will read it. Russia, China, and Iran vote with others to demand trillions in reparations from UK taxpayers, and the Labour government abstain. Britain led the fight to end slavery. Why didn't Starmer's, that's Prime Minister Starmer's representative, vote against this? Why didn't, ignorance or cowardice? We shouldn't be paying for a crime we helped to eradicate and still fight today. But this person definitely, when I read that tweet, I remembered this video, and also I have invited you, where it's a 45-minute video for anyone who really wants to have an understanding of why slavery needs to be categorized as crime. It is the worst crime that a human being have ever committed against the next human. And Yeah, so I was thinking of your presentation where you raise actually most of us or most of the people who are familiar with history knows that okay, it was abolished in 1834 in UK, but they don't know that what UK opted after that in terms of compensation. So how do you interpret this kind of response from political leaders in the UK? Do you see it as a lack of historical awareness, political positioning, or something deeper?
Well, you know, this is a black woman
Yeah.
of Nigerian birth, and she knows exactly, I suspect she knows exactly what she's doing. I don't think it's just ignorance. Everything she said in her statement there is wrong, and she probably knows it is wrong, but she says it anyway because she thinks it will promote her chances to be accepted as a political leader by the white establishment of the UK. So it is probably just opportunism, but opportunism at the expense of her own African people. First of all, first, I mean, the people who fought to end slavery and who brought about the abolition of slavery were the enslaved themselves. It was our ancestors. Slavery was terminated because of the unrelenting resistance, the rebellions that were coming fast and furious in places like the Caribbean. In fact, when the British politicians went to the House of Commons to lay the slavery abolition bill, that is what they said. They said, we cannot continue this system. If we do not abolish this thing from above, the enslaved through revolutionary action are going to abolish it from below. Let's get that very clear. Britain established, look, the first British foray into enslavement in Africa, 1562. John Hawkins led that first slaving expedition to the west coast of Africa. He did it. He did it with the under the auspices of Queen Elizabeth I. And she, in fact, sent along her own 700-ton vessel named the Jesus of Lubeck. Hawkins led that expedition along the west coast of Africa, militarily attacking African towns and villages, destroying them, kidnapping the people, taking them as captives on board, and taking them away as slaves. And that was the beginning. So, and they went on from that start in 1562 to establish this industrial scale slavery enterprise that lasted for hundreds of years. So they established it. They were the biggest. I mean, it didn't start with them. Even before them, there was Spain and Portugal, but they became the biggest operators of that slavery system, and they benefited tremendously. That slavery system became the foundation of their industrial revolution, their industrial society. So this lady is talking nonsense. Um, First of all, they established it, they ran it for hundreds of years. It was the resistance of the enslaved Africans that forced them reluctantly to pass the legislation abolishing it. And as you implied, even after they abolished it, they could not help but still continue to try to derive, even after, quote unquote, it became illegal under their law. And then the transition towards direct colonization of the African of the African continent. I mean, we know that we know the whole story. The other thing is, where is this trillions of pounds in this resolution? There's no mention of any trillions of pounds in this resolution. This resolution, after it lays out the whole case, why this is the greatest crime against humanity, it says, it calls upon these European powers to engage in a process of good faith dialogue with the countries of Africa and the Caribbean. It is the same approach that CARICOM took when CARICOM started the reparations campaign in 2013. CARICOM wrote for 6 of these European governments in 2016. Letters were sent to the head of state of the UK, Spain, Portugal, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark. And the letter said to them, look, these are the facts. This is what you did. This is the crime that you were involved in. Our people suffered from that crime, were disadvantaged. We are now saying to you, come and sit with us. Let us discuss this situation, and let us agree on what you can do to help repair some of the damage that you have done. No mention of trillions of pounds and all of that. We said, come, let us discuss and let us work out. Let us work out a program of repairs, of compensation, of repairing that damage that we can agree upon. And basically, this is what the resolution says. It also says, over the centuries, you stole many, many cultural properties of the African people, all kinds of artifacts, historical artifacts, very valuable. You have them in your museums, you have them in private collections. They must be returned to the African and Caribbean nations. And it goes on to say other things, that United Nations institutions like UNESCO and the Office for the Human Rights Council, that these United Nations institutions must now put more emphasis on public education about slavery, memorialization, etc. It does speak about setting up a global reparations fund, and it says that that is going to happen, and that everybody who was implicated, they are going to be invited to make some contributions to the global reparations fund. But it does not, it is not targeting anybody with trillions of pounds, etc. That is a figment of her imagination, or something that she invented. It is a very reasonable and rational approach that says, admit the wrong, or having admit the wrong, come and sit with us and let us discuss what we can work out, something reasonable, something sensible, something that we will feel comfortable with. So, we are not going to prejudge the situation. Let us look at it in a rational way, and let us see what we come up with to repair the damage that has been done. And there are many, many ways in which we could go about repairing that damage. There are many things that need to be repaired, not just at a national level, but that whole international economic and political order. All those institutions need to be repaired. All of those international institutions, World Bank, IMF, UN Security Council, all of the practices need to be reformed, revamped, so that they are more fair, more just. They're more focused on facilitating and directing resources towards African countries and African people and Caribbean countries. So there are many, many ways in which we could sit down and structure a program of repair, a program of reparation.
Interesting. Now, let's go back to that moment where I said how I rejoice to see the African Union and CARICOM coming together. And if anything, this moment has revealed that the collective strengths of these two community, and how when they work together, how they can be powerful and how they can deliver. So now that you also told us there is the CELAC, where in which CARICOM and the Latin American community. Now, do you see now, as far as AU and CARICOM is concerned, do you see this as a beginning, something stronger for the two communities to work together in the long term, particularly when there is an issue that concerns both, and bringing that for a resolution in the United Nations, not just reparation, but on broader global issues or continental issues that concerns and affects both regions?
Malet, this era has to become the era of Pan-Africanism. There's something called Pan-Africanism. It is a philosophy. It is a program of action. It emerged out of oppressed people responding to their oppression. It is a liberatory movement, a liberatory philosophy, and it is the key. That we, all of us, people and nations of the continent of Africa, of the Caribbean, all of the African descended populations of the diaspora, we have to make a new effort now to revive and embrace that concept of Pan-Africanism. We have to give it to our young people. We have to teach them about the Pan-African history and philosophy, all the great figures of Pan-Africanism, from Blyden in Liberia and to Marcus Garvey, Emperor Haile Selassie, Emperor Menelik, Kwame Nkrumah, CLR James, George Padmore, the Amy Jakes Garvey, Mignon Ford, and we can go on. Bob Marley, we can go on and on. Pan-Africanism has such a rich history and so many layers to it. And the thing about Pan-Africanism is that it has embedded in it the most humane, the most elevated, noble, and humane values and ideas. And we are now living in a world that has been dominated by the worst of capitalist, imperialistic, Eurocentric, negative, anti-human ideas, anti-development ideas that rather than focusing on community and brotherhood and liberation, seems to focus on just the opposite, on division and racism and warfare and plundering, and so the world needs Pan-Africanism. The world needs this liberatory doctrine and philosophy and movement, and we need it. And if we can come together and if we can use that Pan-African idea to unify ourselves, to build our own strength, and to launch these liberatory and developmental ideas as an antidote to what is happening what is happening in the world today, what is happening with genocide in Gaza, wars of aggression against Iran, all kinds of terrible, negative, anti-human denigration of and discrimination against Black people. So I am very hopeful that, when we started this reparations journey in the Caribbean, when we came together to form our CARICOM reparations movement commission in 2013, we said that the 21st century was destined to be the century of reparative justice. And reparative justice for us as Black people, but to the extent that we can carry out the repairs that we deserve, those repairs will not only be repairs to our national society, those repairs will also be repairs to the international order, the international institutions, and will has the possibility to inaugurate a new era for this world, to transform these very negative relationships that currently exist between the white and brown and Black people and nations of this world. These relationships that are rooted in those centuries of imperialism and colonization and racism, these relationships that are still marked by notions of domination and victimization and prejudice. So to the extent that we as Black people, we embrace that Pan-African idea, we use it to help transform our own individual situation, it is also going to have a wider international impact. And I am making the case that the world needs that African liberatory ethos, because if we continue with these Eurocentric values and behaviors, what will we end up with? More and more extraction, more and more capitalist inequality visited on the world, a climate crisis that gets worse, where our planet becomes unlivable for humanity, more and more nuclear antagonisms, and maybe some nuclear conflict that destroys humanity, more pandemics, So Pan-Africanism, I think that all of us now would be well advised. If we don't know about Pan-Africanism as a Black person, go and learn about it, introduce our young people to it, and let us come together. Let us come together in a powerful Pan-African movement.
But can you expand on how Pan-Africanism can impact also to the world, not only to the Black people or to us, to Black people, because it has a principle of what that it can affect the international community regardless of race? Because if we say this, I might understand, but to other non-Black race people, like, what are you talking about? Isn't Pan-Africanism all about,
But African humanism is the opposite. African communalism, those African values of community, of Ubuntu, of being invested in each other versus these Eurocentric capitalist values of competition, of commodification of everything. Everything is now a commodity that can be bought and sold and exploited. And slavery was the beginning of capitalism. Capitalism is about commodifying everything. and reducing it to market forces to be bought and sold. And they even went so far as to commodify human beings. We were the first victims of capitalism. They built capitalism on our backs, the backs of our ancestors. And so as Black people, we resisted this. And we resisted this with notions that said, no, we want a liberatory social order. We believe that all human beings, in the Caribbean, for example, all of our societies, we subscribe to a political philosophy of social democracy, of democratic socialism, but basically those humane values that say every human being is entitled to nurture, to housing, to being fed, to healthcare, to education, and that comes out of our experience of enslavement, of the gross oppression, the dehumanization that we had to resist. These people tried to dehumanize us. They attempted to even deny that we had any human essence, that we were not even human beings, that we were wild beasts. And they even went so far as to say we were chattels, we were just things, we were soulless property. And so in resisting that, we had to emphasize, no, we don't accept that definition of us. We are precious beings, sacred beings, and each one matters, you see? And so we have created, because that was our historical experience, we have created societies that know instinctively that each one matters. We have to build cultures that nurture human beings, that provide for us all. And so the point I'm making is, because of that history, and also because it was part of the original culture of the African continent. I mean, African humanism, African communalism. So we begin with that, but also out of struggle, those were the kind of liberatory ideas that we needed, the kind of humanism that we needed to withstand this effort to dehumanize us, to reduce us to being less than human. So we had to resist that. We had to fight against that. If you look at the culture of the Caribbean, the music, the dance, the proverbs, the nation language, the folklore, it is about, it is communal. It is always a search for freedom. When you look at the music, it's a search for freedom, and so I am saying that because of our ancestral culture on the African continent, but also because of the kinds of culture that we developed in these slave societies, because we were forced to, we had to, otherwise we would not have survived. We actually have something very precious, and it was these pioneers going back. You can go back to the 19th century. You could even go back beyond the 19th century. But it was these pioneers, these activists, who recognized that, look, all African people, we are facing a common problem. We are facing a common oppression. And so we have to come together. And so that movement became known as the Pan-African movement. And as we came together, we then had to work out, well, what are the principles and values that are going to guide this movement, this collective movement that we are bringing together? And you go back and you see the kinds of principles, and whether it was Blyden and Nkrumah, the idea of the African personality, very liberatory ideas, and so the point I'm making is that we have a lot to work with. whether it is Ethiopianism, it is Rastafari, it is all kinds of jazz music, it's reggae, calypso, spooge, you name it. We have a lot to work with as an African people, and I'm saying that the time has come where we need to come together. We need to re-embrace that Pan-African philosophy, all of those Pan-African heroes, all of those ideas, that philosophy, that theory, that practice, and give it to our young people, and you know, and let us uplift ourselves collectively. And I think that's the path we are on. You know, that is why CARICOM is reaching out to the African continent. They're reaching out to the AU, and that is why we said, let us use this reparations campaign as something to connect us, and let us do it together. You know, so I think that this is a period that it is a very difficult period. All kinds of negative things are happening in the world. We see the resurgence of all kinds of racist movements, fascist movements. But at the same time, we do have a resource that is within our grasp. That resource is Pan-Africanism. The ideas, the heroes, the philosophy, the praxis, and I think we would be well advised to embrace that Pan-African movement in a very conscious way now.
There now on practice, don't you think, I don't know about Caribbean, but in Africa, most of our practice is totally going to the opposite. We are trying to catch up on the West, going on the direction of capitalism. The idea of communism is not there. I don't think people even would buy it. And I take, for example, for the case of Ethiopia, as I come from Ethiopia, the Rastafari community, they came with this idea when they come from Caribbean or from US or Europe, with this idea of creating community. You have been there not once, twice, and recently in Shashamane. And that idea of communism, to create a community, all the idea and the value and the principles they have come with now thrown out of the window, not because they want, because of various constraints, it wasn't possible. And I don't think Ethiopia is the only case. I think most of African countries are like that. We are like, everything what is Western is glittery and the right thing, starting from our religion, everything white is angelic. So how are we going to do that?
Well, the Africans will have to decide whether they wish to commit suicide or not. So if they wish to commit suicide, we'll go down that path. But there are many of us who don't intend that our people are going to commit suicide. We see where the world is heading. We see where those currents are taking us, and they're taking us over a precipice. So that cannot be our future. That cannot be the answer. And we have, okay, it is by coming together. We have to find a way to resurrect and to strengthen those progressive elements, those progressive movements within our collective reality. The visit that the conference that we had last year in Addis, and we went to visit Shashamane, the Caribbean political leaders that went to Addis for the summit with the African Union. We went to visit Shashamane. I would tell you that I am pushing my government. I have already done a report. I mean, I've written to my government how we need to follow up on what happened, what we experienced in Ethiopia in September last year, and how we from the Caribbean, the governments, we have to have a greater embrace of that Rastafari community in Ethiopia. And we have to do things, we have to reach out to the authorities in Ethiopia to suggest to them a different way of seeing and engaging with that community. One of the things we said that the African Union needs to establish an office at the CARICOM Secretariat in Guyana, and CARICOM needs to establish an office in Addis at the African Union headquarters. So we need to get this relationship on a more secure institutional basis. We need to work together. You see, there's some strengths that we have in the Caribbean that we need to share with the continent, and there's some strengths you have on the continent that you need to share with us in the Caribbean. And I think that's how we have to look at it. And hopefully, a lot of these conflicts that you have on the African continent, brother fighting brother, sometimes conflicts going on for decades, ordinary people being murdered, having their livelihood snatched away. We cannot accept that is our permanent reality. We have to see these things as temporary aberrations, and we have to that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that, look, we have to get back to our most noble and humane and liberatory ideas. We had them in the Caribbean because we had to fight against slavery and colonization. You had them on the African continent. You had liberation movements that had to fight against European colonization and entrenched systems of white privilege and white discrimination against African people. Yes, in many respects, we have lost our way. We have wandered off into destructive paths, but we cannot accept that is our permanent reality. We have to have the confidence that there's enough in our own historical and cultural heritage to get us back onto the right paths. And maybe, just maybe, if we come together and and we harness the inspiration of the most progressive and most courageous and principled of our leadership, that we can get back on the right path. But I don't think we have a choice, because we don't want to commit suicide. We want to do something that does credit to the struggles of our ancestors. And the reparations idea, we come back to reparations. The reparations idea is an idea that helps really to focus us in on. It helps to focus us on the right things. Repair, not only repair materially, but repair culturally, psychologically, coming together to do it collectively. That is why the reparations campaign is so vitally important. Just by pursuing reparations collectively, it means that we have to come together. We have to investigate our history. We have to know about it. We have to learn more about the damage that was done to us. Just by pursuing reparations, it is going to help us to get our thinking clearer, to get our actions clearer, and to produce something that is positive. So I don't see any negatives in reparations. It is all, even if it takes us too long to bring, to get the resources, the material resources out of these European governments. But the mere fact that we are pursuing it together it is going to help us to be on the right path, to be doing the right things, and to be thinking the right thoughts, you know? And I see reparations within a broader context of Pan-Africanism. Reparations within a broader context of, and all of us have contributed to Pan-Africanism. The people from the Caribbean, the Black people from the United States, the W.B. Du Boises and the Malcolm X's, etc., and our brothers and sisters from our mother continent, the continent of Africa. You know, so this, you know, this is a time for us. We must not be pessimistic. We must not be defeatist. We must come together, and we must come together with optimism and do our best as a collective.
The more you know, the more you say that we must come together, we must come together, because, and what I picked for me, I think this will be the highlight of our conversation tonight. Often we consider reparation is something Africa or Black people, Africa and CARICOM and global Black people need to talk, you know, need to bring this agenda to those who committed it against us, slavery. But this is something, because you combine it with a broader Pan-Africanism, it's something that will help us to heal if we talk about it, like to look inward, even under reparation, as you said, for example, the fights, the wars that we are having within the continent. If we just talk about what we have gone through, our ancestors, it will definitely help us as a community. Yeah, that's something new concept, and I'm happy I picked up that one.
And bear in mind, you know, we are also challenging these European folk. We are confronting them. They live a myth. They have constructed a myth about themselves and about their civilization.
A myth being one.
A myth. And they have constructed this myth. And we are confronting them with the truth about their history and their civilization. We are saying to them, look, what you built, it was built on criminality. It was built on raping and plundering other people. You have to come to terms with that. You have to acknowledge it. You have to come to regret it. And you have to rise to the moral stature of wanting to make some repair, some compensation. And the point is, we have been able to have that impact on some elements of those societies already. We in the Caribbean, we have seen elite European families, when confronted with that accusation and that evidence, who have said and who have come down to the Caribbean, they've come to apologize, they've come to try to put some programs in place, some of the institutions. Admittedly, it has not yet happened with the government. But the point is, as we pursue this reparations cause, and as I said, we have to have allies within those countries. And to get those allies, we have to educate them about their own historical record. Some years ago, I spoke at a trade union congress in Manchester, England. It was the whole, the big English trade union annual conference of all the unions. And I spoke about slavery and reparations to a group of experienced British trade unionists. These are labor people. And you know what they said to me? They told me they were hearing things that they had never heard before. No one had taught them these things in their national education system. So I'm also making the point that our reparations campaign is going to help get these people to have a better understanding of the mythology that their ruling classes have constructed, the fact that it is wrong, and many of the wrongs that that ruling class committed, and that now have to be faced and acknowledged and transcended. So to the extent that we pursue reparations, we are also going to help them to reform their own thinking and their own culture. It may not be easy, and as I said, it is going to be a struggle. We know that. We know it is going to be a struggle, but uh, we will benefit from that struggle. Believe you me, we will benefit from it.
Now, coming back to where we started, now that slavery has been formally recognized at this level, how do we move from recognition to tangible repair? What should justice actually look like in practice?
Well, it's a work in progress. If you read the resolution, the
Okay.
resolution ends with 18 measures that we are being encouraged to undertake. In addition to that, if you go back and read the joint African Union CARICOM Declaration on Reparations, there's also another outline of measures that we came together and agreed that we must take. One of which actually is to go beyond just Africa and the Caribbean to establish a global Africa Commission and to bring other parts of the African diaspora on board with us. So there's no one bullet. It's a whole campaign that we're going to have to be engaged in, and we're going to have to come together. We have resolved that the heads of the governments of Africa and CARICOM are going to be meeting with regularity. We're going to work on this thing. We we now have in Barbados in the Caribbean, we have African Institute for the first time. For the first time in hundreds of 400 years, we have the Africa Export-Import Bank here established in the Caribbean, working with us, helping with investment and to establish trade and economic linkages. We now have to work on that here linkage. We are hoping that maybe it could be Ethiopian Airlines. So all of these things are now in motion. Things are actually happening, and but we have to see them through, and we have to, of course, bring more and more people on board, more governments. But things are happening. I mean, the CELAC Africa high-level forum just last week in Colombia is very, very hopeful site, because that is building upon the CARICOM Africa, and then the collaboration at the UN. This is something that we have been saying that we need to do, and we did it yesterday. We did it, So yes, it's still a lot of work ahead of us, but it is all about coming together. It is all about collective endeavor, and we can go to these documents to see, the various ideas that have been put on the table for us to work with. Yeah. So I can't give you any one prescription. I can tell you it is going to have to be a multifaceted, multi-layered effort, and we are going to have to make points of connection in so many different areas. But it's all good because we are really one people. We are one people, we are one civilization. Yeah, we have different emphases and we bring some different things to the table, but underpinning it all is that African essence. African essence, that binds us together. So we must never fall victim to that foolishness in the United States of America of wanting to separate. Nah, in fact, and that is so foreign to us in the Caribbean. We embrace our continental African brothers and sisters. I'm married to a Ghanaian woman. And even at that level, we are embracing the coming together. Yeah. We are on our way. We are on our way. We just have to keep going, and we have to maintain our optimism and a positive attitude, because failure is not an option. We can't afford to fail, Malet. We simply cannot afford to fail. So victory is certain.
So I imagine that would be what you would tell to a younger generation who are now inheriting this movement, who look up to you as a team. I mean, for me, I have seen how only Barbados has been vocal to this, or even CARICOM, and the African Union was not in the place. I can say this, and now I'm happy how Ghana is stepping in. It doesn't surprise me. It will be that it is Ghana out of the 54 or 55 countries, but because it's also a country that sent a team and help for Jamaica when that disaster happened. Ghana is always there, really proud of the leadership. But yeah, for those of us and the younger generation who want to step in, as you said, the struggle is long. It's not easy. If there's anything you want to add, the floor is yours. If not,
I'll share a little secret with you. Just last night, I was approached by academic of the dean really, at the University of the West Indies, with they want to take the Pan-African love story of Arnold and Mignon Ford, and they want to give it to the students to create a play out of it.
Wow.
Yes, and they want to establish a whole program of Pan-African studies. So this is why I'm saying to you, yes, we have to keep pushing this agenda. And there are signs, and I keep pushing it. Yes, I am the inveterate optimist. I don't accept failure. I look for those points of progress, and where you find those points of progress, you encourage them, you massage them, and but yes, there are many encouraging signs that once again we are coming into our own as an African people. We are reaching out to each other. I can tell you that idea is very much abroad in the Caribbean, that our new frontier is the continent of Africa. We have had centuries of these exploitative relationships with Europe and North America. And it is said, our governments say it, our statesmen say it, that the new horizon for us is to reconnect with our African motherland and to reach across this Atlantic, to reverse the middle passage, So I can only hope that the people and that there are many people and leaders and institutions on the continent of Africa that have that a similar vision as well. That this is a time for us to come together. And I just reiterate what I said.
Yeah.
We have so much in that Pan-African philosophy and that Pan-African history to work with, which, these are like cultural resources that are within our grasp, and we owe it to ourselves to pick up those resources and use them, and so it was music to my ears last night when I was being informed that is the direction that the university is going down,
Yeah, that would be very interesting. At least I am very proud that I took the initiative also when I buy it for myself, that I gave it also. I suggested it to the Leiden University, and they have it also now in their African Studies Center. But yeah, that's really a big thing. Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. This is not, we will continue. And for me, I really, really want to see that these two community, brothers and sisters, coming together, the African community and CARICOM, the Caribbean, and advancing such agendas that affect both of us, and showing their power. If we would have, this will not happen if we don't create that unity. And really, that's something, the highlight of it for me. It means a lot if we take a lesson, how we can win, how we can get a resolution.
Yes. And we will do it. We will do it. As I said, victory is certain. Defeat is not an option. So we will, just like how our ancestors rose to the challenge of overcoming the worst system of oppression ever, the worst crime against humanity ever. We survived it and we transcended it, and we are not lesser people, and so we are going to come out victorious as well too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good evening. It was a long talk, but it's a conversation. So yeah, thank you.
Good. We talk again soon.
Yeah. Bye.